Feeling better, I take it. My apologies, I did not mean to frighten you. I'm quite pleased to see you up and about. There is much I'd like to show you that requires a bit of walking. Ah, yes, quite astute of you. The Wind of Olgu does indeed play quite the pivotal role in the design of this structure. In fact, the Foundation has quite the complex ritual enacted upon it. This allows me to have much more space than I normally would, by following the laws of physics, as there are in fact hundreds of rooms and pathways in here. No need to worry about getting lost, however. I devised quite the clever spell with some assistance from one of my associates in the Grey College. If you ever desire to return to your room, simply imagine it in your mind and close your eyes while crossing a threshold, and you will arrive back safely. However, I will take this opportunity to remind you of the rules. First, make certain that you are indoors by nightfall, and do not venture out until dawn. Second, under no circumstances must you ever enter my library, regardless of what you may believe you see or hear coming from that room. You can't miss it. The library has immense doors carved from Drakewald oak, covered in runes you will not recognize. I tell you this so that if you happen to come across it, you know what to avoid. I better not find you trying to seek it out. Do we understand one another? Good. Wait, what is that you're holding? I'll take that, my pupil. Quickly now! Where did you find this? You do not recall picking it up? Well then, perhaps it is for the best that you refrain from wandering my abode, at least for now. I'll bet you're feeling suddenly tired, aren't you? Almost as if the world has grown dull? Are you feeling anything else? No, not really? Well, that's a relief. It would seem that Ranald favors you yet again. Not many humans can hold a faithless charm for long, before they fall prey to its rather unfortunate effects. Had I not run into you sooner, you quite likely would have had your mind dragged into insanity by the charm. Or worse. You've never heard of a faithless charm? Well, that is not much of a surprise. They are thankfully rare this far south. Come, I've prepared some honeyed mead in your choice of either exotic fruit from the distant Southlands or a plate of meats. The salted pork is particularly good. Ah, that's better. Now, back to the charm. The one you were holding, I acquired many years ago, when I was exploring the bitter forests of Norska. I had been trekking rumors of a rare tribe of Norskans, who were cursed with quite the nasty mutation of all having flaming skulls for heads. While not an unusual gift from Khorne in particular, the fact that the entire tribe possessed it caught my interest. Clearly, something was at work. In any event, when I arrived at the edge of the wood, I found a bizarre token hanging from one of the trees. Crudely fashioned from an assortment of feathers and the bones of men, it clearly was intended to serve as a warning to those who would enter the Creator's territory. What caught my attention, however, was that this trinket bore a remarkably terrible curse upon it. The moment that I attempted to lift it from the branch it hung upon, I felt a surge of energy pulse through my body as my senses heightened. You felt that as well? Yes, well, thankfully, the wards I keep on my person for such trips guarded me from the addictive element of this curse, and I quickly secured it within a device meant to contain such things. I had enough experience to recognize the sinister power of the dark gods, allowing me to deduce that I had finally acquired a faithless charm. You see, this token blesses the holder with incredible power, allowing them to react and move with speed even the elves would envy. But it comes at a price, just like it did for the creature that crafted the charm. I had stumbled upon one of the rarest colossi to be found in the old world. A chaos giant? Oh no, my dear student, what I had found was far more deadly and terrifying than any giant. What I had found was the most bitter and hated of all the dark gods' creations, the Curs'd Ettin. I had heard the legends, of course, the ancient sagas told by the Norse tribes about the warlord King Jorunder the Betrayer. Much of the tale has been lost due to the bloody ravages of time, but this excerpt remains. Least son of Farnir, King Jorunder, forswore his allegiance to kin and clan, pledging his line in fulsome service to Chaos's dark lords. To Jorunder, the gods gifted such glory of war, such bloody victory, that all his kin obeyed him gladly, till great grew his host of battle-wrought warriors. Jorunder was undone, lust for power his bane, troth sundered, his masters brought forth a curse on all his blood. Brothers, sons, all suffered his fate, two-faced now in form and thought, swollen and twisted, faithless hearts made plain. As I am the Loremaster, one of my many gifts is the ability to discover the truth about the world, even those long believed lost to time. The saga of King Jorunder being one of those I had learned. Many centuries ago, there indeed was a warlord king by the name of Jorunder, who dominated the frigid lands of Norska. A man of limitless ambition and a desperate hunger for power. He sought out the demons of chaos and bargained with them for might and strength to be granted to him and his people. With this unholy power at their command, Jorunder's tribe won many victories, and their bloody campaigns earned them a great number of slaves and vast riches. Yet, as Jorunder's glory grew, so too did his pride, until at last in hubris he refused the call to a long-prophesied invasion of the southern lands. Instead, he betrayed his demonic lords by conquering the lands of those who had paid heed to the call to war, treacherously ravaging the length and breadth of Norska to ransack chaos altars and bring back his prisoners as thralls. Thus were the chaos gods angered, and their cruelty was visited on Jorunder and his kin 100-fold. Jorunder and his descendants kept the might they so craved, but in horrific form. Cursed forever, to be riven of soul and twisted of body, fused kinsman to kinsman, greater and lesser in constant struggle for mastery, horrific to look upon, and denied the blessed mindless oblivion of spawndom. Driven from Norska's towns and villages, they learned to hate all that lived in their works, for they only served to remind them of what they had lost. Over time, as they grew in hatred, they grew too in size, and those that survived the terrors of those lands became a terrifying race of giants, bitterest of all the monsters under the shadow of the dark gods. As eager as I was to see whether the myths were true, I crossed into the territory of the Curs'd Ettin, and made quick pursuit of the tribe I had originally come to find. You see, I suspected that the mutant Norskins must have come to slay the Ettin themselves, perhaps to sacrifice the monster in the name of the blood god. It wasn't long before I heard enraged screaming, intermixed with the sounds of battle and the occasional bellow, presumably from the Titan I sought. My path led me to a clearing, where I at last gazed upon the horrific majesty of a legend made flesh. Standing easily the height of a giant, but far bulkier, was an absolutely hideous monster, with the skin the color of deep bruised flesh. Atop its bloated form were two heads that gazed out upon the surrounding Norskins with a cruel intellect that sent a shiver down my spine. One of the heads was impressively deformed, squirming and writhing, all the while snorting with barely contained bloodlust. The other head seemed far more cunning, and simply studied its foes, bellowing a challenge to the cornate berserkers and egging them on. Sure enough, they charged, given over to the bloodlust so common among the Lord of Skulls favored. To my shock, the Ettin did not simply roar and wade into battle like a giant would have, but instead maneuvered, with a shocking burst of speed, to place itself behind a line of immense trees it must have toppled over shortly before my arrival. Each fallen trunk acted as an obstacle for the flame-headed warriors, slowing their charge as they attempted to close with the Colossus that had so easily navigated the difficult terrain. When the first few Norskins attempted to vault the last barrier, their war cries were cut short, as the Curs'd Ettin suddenly brought down its fists in a barrage that obliterated them into meat paste while they were vulnerable. At first, I thought the creature had simply been lucky with that eager attack. But when the next score of berserkers slowed to more carefully approach, the disfigured monster responded by launching the blood-splattered log forward with a titanic kick. The Norskins barely had time to scream before the immense projectile crushed all their bones in an instant. At this point, I expected the remaining berserkers to flee, as clearly the horrific giant had no intention of allowing them to engage properly. Hideous as it may be, the Ettin clearly possessed at least a moderate form of intelligence, and knew it had the upper hand. But then I learned the true power behind this mutant tribe, when they called upon their chieftain, a demon prince of Khorne. The monstrous warrior came charging out of the tree line, smashing through each of the obstacles before it with ease. I could not look away as the Dark Champion bore down upon the Ettin, hacking away at the giant with two axes crackling with unholy power. With each blow, a gout of poisonous ooze spewed out from the cursed monster to coat the berserkers attempting to surround the beast. Clearly quite toxic, as those unfortunate souls struck by the Ettin's rancid blood did not get back up. The Demon Prince cared not for its mortal followers, however, and simply focused on hacking the giant apart bit by bit. Often, the wicked axes would be robbed of landing a clean hit, as the monster's flesh in many places had mutated into tough scales. At first, I thought that its hide was sustaining the Curs'd Ettin against the Demon Prince's assault, but then I realized there was something else at play. The colossal brute was regenerating, its flesh knitting back together at an alarming rate to repair all but the most heinous of wounds in a matter of seconds. Still, the clearly mutated giant was distressed, as it could not match the Khorne demon's incredible skill and speed. But then something changed. Due to the incredible damage the Ettin sustained, the head that seemed to bear the brute's main intellect lost control. It bellowed in protest, even as the screaming head snapped its attention onto the Demon Prince. The creature's savage mind finally focusing on the thing before it. The Champion of Chaos struck with his axes again, but this head merely responded by shrieking and raising up its truly massive, twisted club-like arm high into the air. The Demon of Khorne obviously saw the attack coming, and held his unholy weapons out to block. With his full set of god-blessed chaos armor, and the very fabric of reality twisting around him, distorting him, and making him difficult to harm. Not even a chaos dragon or a greater demon could have landed a truly telling blow. The Ettin, however, did not care, bringing its hammer hand down like the wrath of the gods themselves, smiting the demon with a single blow. Flabbergasted is the only way I can express how I felt in that moment. The Curs'd Ettin had crushed a demon prince like a bug caught under a Gromril boot. Between the terrifying nature of the monster and the shocking ease with which their benefactor had fallen, the Norskins could take no more, and finally routed. When they turned to flee, I watched a transformation overtake one of the Ettin's faces. The clever head, the one that had lost control moments before, broke into an expression of pure sadistic glee as its foes attempted to run. It took over, and it caught them all. The mutated monster far nimbler on its feet than giants, and able to casually step over any obstacles between it and prey. It proceeded to scoop up several of these broken berserkers into its grasp, and those it could not carry, the Ettin simply crushed their legs with sweeping blows. It was intentionally doing its best to keep them alive. It turns out, the Curs'd Ettin does have one thing in common with giants besides their size. They both share a massive appetite for flesh. Remember this next note well, however. Unlike the giants of this world that you may encounter, the Ettins are incredibly cruel. I observed for hours, to take proper notes upon the creature, of course, watching in fascination as it reveled in torturing the poor souls captured after the battle. The two heads continued to wrestle for domination, and flip-flopped occasionally, but regardless of which held control, they both delighted in tearing apart their prey chunk by chunk to devour them. Careful, oh so careful, to maximize their suffering. Heed my warning well, dear student of mine. Should you ever have the misfortune to encounter a Curs'd Ettin, it would be far better to die by any means, other than being left to their tender mercies. After some time, I managed to follow the creature until it encountered others of its kind. This is what I learned during my venture. The saga, for the most part, is correct. The Curs'd Ettins are a race of horribly cursed men that over the centuries have swollen up into immense stature. They seemed to have indeed enraged the dark gods, as their curse is quite cruel. They have insanely long life, perhaps being immortal, unable to die unless cut down in battle, and even that is difficult due to their giant-like endurance and regenerative abilities. Each of them has 2 heads with vaguely opposed personalities, dubbed as the Betrayer and the Savage. The Betrayer was once a skilled warrior and held high rank under King Jorunder, and it still retains much of the skills it held back then. Concerningly skilled combatants consumed with bitter hatred for all other things, and it delights so much in unleashing horrible cruelty. The Betrayer is also disturbingly skilled at navigating battlefields, able to roam ahead and prepare clever ambushes for their prey. The other head is known as the Savage, and it was once a crazed berserker with no regard for tactics or caution. As one of the Ettin's personalities, when in control, it completely disregards self-defense or careful combat, and instead just indulges in frenzied, all-out attacks. Furthermore, while the Curs'd Ettins are indeed heavily mutated creatures, their mutations rarely vary between individuals, which is quite unusual. Almost as if the dark gods, normally chaotic entities of course, deliberately crafted them into a specific image instead of just unleashing random afflictions upon them. This may well explain why they never degenerate into spawndom and keep their human intellect. That way they can appreciate their suffering. There are variants, though, worth noting. The most common mutation Ettins possess is what is known as a hammerhand. One of their arms grotesquely warped to the point that it's just a slab of pure muscle that can hit with such a horrific amount of force that it can easily kill all but the most titanic of beasts. In my observations, the hammerhand is more than capable of slaying giants, manticores, and even dragons in one well-placed blow. There are, of course, more uncommon mutations. The Ettin I told you about had one such rare trait. Those that dwell in the northern reaches of the world, close to the Chaos Wastes, tend to become what are known as scaled horrors. These brutes are covered in scabrous scales that can turn aside most attacks, and their blood has become rancid, toxic sludge. However, there are less pleasant mutations. One that I encountered is known as the Gibberer, meaning that the savage head had devolved to the point that it essentially had an infantile mind, capable of little more than drooling and wailing constantly. As I'm sure you can imagine, these deafening, mewling shrieks are quite unnerving to all but the bravest of souls. There is also a particularly deadly breed of Ettin, appropriately named the Man-Scyther. These abominations are quite uncommon, and in place of the signature hammer hand, the Man-Scyther instead mutates one, or sometimes both, of its arms to be covered in wicked bone spikes or long calcified claws. There is one final type, however. The most rare and dangerous of all the Curs'd Ettin race. I only managed to encounter one such nightmare in my travels, but even that single meeting nearly brought my end. The Rune Caller. This particular colossus has retained more of its intelligence than any other of its kind, and bears the least mutation, missing the signature hammer hand their species is so well known for. If that alone does not give them away, their bodies are also covered in strange tribal tattoos from the elder days when they were shaman sorcerers of Norska. I see the realization dawning upon you. Yes, they still retain the wisdom and skill to control the winds of magic. This makes them one of the largest wizards to exist in this dark and terrifying world of ours. Wielding an affinity for the winds of Ulgu, Shaiish, or Gur, or Shadows, Death, and Beasts if you prefer their more common names, they can be quite the deadly combatants. Well then, I think that is enough discussion for one night. I will note, I find that the Curs'd Ettins are an excellent cautionary tale about why one should refrain from bargaining with the powers of chaos, if at all possible. After all, those horrid creatures hate the dark gods above all else, yet have no choice but to suffer and serve the very entities who damned them. Such is the fickle nature of chaos. In any event, I trust that you now understand why you should refrain from picking up any random trinkets you find while here. Sometimes my items from my collection like to wander from their resting places. If you had held onto this faithless charm much longer, then the Ettin's curse would have been your curse. Assuming, of course, that we removed it from you in time. Do let me know if you begin to hear another voice in that eager mind of yours, or suddenly grow a notable amount of inches. I'm sure you're just fine, though. Why don't you get some rest, and sleep well, my dear student? Hey guys, thanks so much for checking out the Curs'd Ettin episode of the Monstrous Arcanum series. I hope you all are really enjoying it. I've been really enjoying reading everyone's comments about what they think of the series, and of course what type of creature, whether specifically or vaguely, they want to see show up hopefully later on in the series. It's been a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to continuing to do it. I do want to note, for those that are waiting for the Chaos Dwarf Q&A series, we have gotten really close to finishing sorting through the questions. I'm basically kind of cutting down the list. That way we can start to get everything answered and put out, but those will start this month. Come hell or high water, Chaos Dwarf questions will start being answered. And real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all my patrons. Thank you all so much for your support. It means the world to me and helps me keep the lights on, keep things working around here. And a big special shout out to the very generous supporters here of the channel: Sign of the Emperor, Eric, Wendell Short Eyes, CJ Ubusta, Jeffrey Ramers, Charles Bode, and Higgins the Seagull. Thank you all again so much for watching. I would really appreciate if you would hit the like button if you liked it. If you're new here, please subscribe for more content like this in the future. And if y'all could share this video around, especially to people that maybe have been fans of the channel but don't know that we're back to putting out lore on a regular schedule, I'd really appreciate it. But in any event, yeah, that's going to be all for me. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you all soon with another episode before you know it. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.